Hey there, Jeremy Goodrich here, your host for the Shine Insurance YouTube channel. And today we're going to address a topic that I get asked about all the time. In fact, it's a video that I've been asked to make more often than probably any other topic. And that is, what is flood insurance and how does it apply to me and my purchasing experience around real estate? We'll do that in just a second. All right, so what is flood insurance? That's the topic today. Let's talk about what we will address. Well, first, we'll answer the question, what is flood insurance? Second, we'll talk about will it be required in my purchase? And third, what to do if it is required. Pretty simple, right? And finally, we'll hit on a rookie mistake, a mistake that I see people make all the time. And because you've watched this video, you will not do the same. All right, well, let's dig in. What is flood insurance? Flood insurance, quite simply, is coverage for the natural rising of water. No homeowner's insurance or investment property insurance policy covers the natural rising of water without adding flood insurance coverage. This is a separate coverage that you have to add. It's for natural rising of water. So it makes sense in scenarios like where you're right next to an ocean and there's hurricanes and stuff like that. But there's natural rising of water around lakes, natural rising of water around rivers, and even natural rising of water in a space where it just rains really, really hard and the ground gets saturated and suddenly there's water pouring into your basement or whatever. So this is a real thing that happens, obviously, and is not covered on your homeowner's policy. So it's good to know that, and it's good to know whether you need it or not. It's important to note that this is not like burst pipes or overflowing drains or sump failure. Probably 50% of the homeowner's claims that I see have to do with water in some way, and most of those are not floods. Burst pipes and things like that are not natural rising of water. These are different things that are covered on other videos that I've created and are generally more covered in insurance policies than natural rising of water is. So will it be required? Well, the first question is, will you have a mortgage? If you're paying cash for a property, you probably don't have to worry about flood insurance unless, of course, you just feel it's a good idea for yourself to get it. But will you be required to get it? If you don't have a mortgage, then you probably won't, because the mortgage lender is the one that requires you to get flood insurance. The next question you have to ask yourself, if you do have a mortgage, if you're like most of us in the world and you do have a mortgage on your properties, is the property in a high-risk flood zone? Mortgage lenders are not going to require flood insurance if the property is not in a high-risk flood zone. So is it in a high-risk flood zone? So you ask yourself, well, how do I know that? Well, here is the website that I think you should go to find out. I've put a link below this video that you can link to. Obviously, you can copy this as well. And when you go to that space, you're going to get to a website page that looks just like this. It's the FEMA Flood Map Service Center, and it says looking for a flood map. So you're trying to find a flood map to see if your property is in a high-risk flood zone. And you're simply going to enter your address into this and click search. Once you do so, you'll see a map just like this, an overhead map like a Google map or whatever, that has all the flood zones in it. And if we back out a little bit, we can see here that on this particular map, the flood zone is pretty clearly noted by colors right here. You can see it's a river, obviously, in this scenario. And so if I'm looking for a property and it shows this property here, then I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to say, well, the high-risk flood zone, you can see this is the zone AE, which is a high-risk flood zone, is right here. And my property is over here in zone X. Zone X is a low risk flood zone. I say, well, my property is right here. It does not look like it's in a high risk flood zone. Now, this particular example is awfully close. So I may check in with my mortgage lender and just say, hey, I noticed that my property is pretty close to a high risk flood zone. Can you confirm whether or not flood insurance will be required? I would think for this particular property, it would not be. The building clearly is not in a flood zone, and the property probably is not in a flood zone either. So you're going to go to this website and look at it and decide whether your property is in a high-risk flood zone or not. Like I said, Zone X is fine. It is not a high-risk flood zone. You're okay. You shouldn't have to worry about being required to put flood insurance on your property. If it's in a Zone A or a Zone AE, E space, and you can see on that map, it's color, it shows by color whether you're in that space or not. It is higher risk, and most likely your mortgage lender is going to require that you have flood insurance. So there you go. You figured out if you have a mortgage, and if you do have a mortgage, then you look on the map. Will it be required? Depends on if it's in a high risk flood zone or not. Okay, so the next question you have to ask yourself, if it is in a high risk flood zone and if you have a mortgage on the property, is, are you serious about this deal? Because I don't want to lead you astray. If flood insurance is a part of the scenario, it could drastically change the cost of insurance associated with that property. It could double the cost of insurance associated with that property. I see that quite often, where flood insurance requirements add a significant amount of insurance premium. So if these things are true, and if you're in a high-risk flood zone, you definitely want to check in and make sure that you're serious about the property and you understand how much it's going to cost. So the next question is what to do if it is, and what you're really trying to answer, right, is what is it going to cost? Well, let me explain how you figure this out. The first step is to ask the seller if they have an elevation certificate. An elevation certificate is the key to getting a solid quote for flood insurance. This certificate is created by a surveyor, and they look at the height of the house as compared to the flood zone risk. So if if the house itself is very close to the river, it's down by the flood zone risk, then that's going to mean that insurance costs are going to be higher. If the house itself is up on a hill and shows that it's much higher than the flood zone risk, then the insurance cost is going to be much lower. The only way to truly know the answer to that question is an elevation certificate. So you've got to get an elevation certificate, and the easiest way to do that is if the seller has one already. So if you think you have to have a flood insurance, step one is to ask the seller if they have an elevation certificate. And if they do, use it to get a quote from an insurance agent. So go to your reputable independent insurance agent and say, hey, I need a flood insurance quote. Here's an elevation certificate. Can you give me a sense of exactly how much insurance should cost for this property? And they should be able to do that for you rather easily. Now, if the seller does not have a flood insurance or an elevation certificate, you absolutely should not trust a ballpark on insurance. If there's not an elevation certificate involved, the insurance agent, no matter what they say, does not really know what the insurance cost could be. And these numbers could swing drastically. It could be $1,000 or it could be $10,000. There's no way of knowing without an elevation certificate. And so if you don't have that elevation certificate, don't trust a quote without one on flood insurance. So step two is, how do I get an elevation certificate if I don't have one? Well, all right, take a deep breath because it takes a little bit. You have to hire a surveyor to create an elevation certificate. Okay, well, that doesn't sound so bad, but here are the things you need to know. One, it's going to take probably 4 to 6 weeks to get that elevation certificate back. The reason is, even if the surveyor can knock it out in 2 or 3 weeks, they have to send it in to the government, to FEMA, and FEMA has to certify and create the elevation certificate. So this process can take a solid, 4 weeks would be really short. 6 weeks is more common. Another thing about it is it costs money. You can't just hire a surveyor for no money. I've seen it cost anywhere between $800 and $1,200 to hire a surveyor to get an elevation certificate. So this is a huge hurdle that you're going to have to get over to get this elevation certificate, to even know what the cost of insurance is. That is just the reality, though. When you do have that elevation certificate, then of course you can get a quote from an insurance agent, and they're going to be able to do that fairly quickly, in 24 hours or so, and get you a number on exactly what that insurance premium would be. So that is what you need to do if you have to have flood insurance and you don't have an elevation certificate. So what did we address? Well, what is flood insurance? It is simply the natural rising of water. It could happen because of hurricanes, because of lakes rising, because of rivers risings, and even because of just heavy rain in a place where there's none of those things. Will it be required? 1, do you need a mortgage? If you don't need a mortgage, probably won't be required. And 2, are you in a high-risk flood zone? And finally, what to do if it is? Well, you need an elevation certificate. If a seller has it, that's great. You can use theirs and get a quote pretty quickly. If a seller doesn't have it, you're going to have to hire a surveyor, wait 6 weeks, and get that elevation certificate back. All right, I promised a rookie mistake, and the rookie mistake is pretty clear in this video. It is not remembering to check the flood zone in your underwriting process on a property. I've engaged with so many people who come to me 2 weeks before closing and they say, my mortgage lender just told me I need flood insurance. What's it going to cost? And I have to tell them this whole scenario that I just described to you and say, well, do you have an elevation certificate? You don't? Well, here's what we're going to have to go to. I mean, I could give you a ballpark, but if I'm going to give you a ballpark, it's $9,000 because I don't trust anything lower because I don't have an elevation certificate. So that is a rookie mistake. All right, that's it. So if you would like some more real estate investing advice, whether you're a first-time home buyer or a seasoned veteran in the investing world, we've got more videos for you. Check them out right to the side of this. And if you feel like you would like to connect with Shine Insurance for insurance on your properties, we'd be more than happy to help. Click the link right there and you can see how to connect with us. All right, until the next time, don't forget to shine.